Hi to everyone. My name is Breda Cullen, and I am a co-director of a company called HR Team. So we've worked in partnership with Iconic for a few years now. So a fantastic working space, and I would definitely recommend it. So we are a HR and employment law company, and we've been in operation now almost 10 years. We have clients across Ireland, Northern Ireland and the UK, and we do assist many of our clients who have international operations as well from an employment law and HR point of view. I suppose we've become increasingly busy over the last 18 months, in particular assisting employers with various different employment law challenges such as temporary layoffs, redundancies, recruitment as well, because a lot of employers continue to grow, disciplinary grievances, absence management, all of those nitty-gritty issues that come with employing staff. In particular, one issue that comes up again and again is performance and the performance management of staff on a day-to-day basis, but also performance appraisals. And that is what this morning's webinar is about. We're going to focus on the whole performance appraisal, what makes a good foundation to have in place before actually getting to the appraisal stage. So we will look briefly at that performance management side of things on a day-to-day basis before we actually look at the appraisal itself. So if we look at our outcomes, we're going to look at the difference between performance management and performance appraisals. They are two completely different things. Performance management is day to day, whereas a performance appraisal only happens at a specific time of the year. And we can't really do a meaningful performance appraisal until we have good performance management structures in place. So we will look at that. How to put a robust performance management structure in place. And we use what's called the B.E.T system. And that's something that we have come up with ourselves at HR Team. It's something that we know works for employers. It's simple, but it's very effective. How to manage staff performance on a day-to-day basis. And again, that's very different from the performance appraisal process. So we'll look briefly at regular feedback and communication, and how then to conduct an effective performance appraisal. So if anyone has any questions at all throughout the course of the webinar, you can go up to the top, or it might be at the bottom of your screen, and go into the chat function, and I can check those periodically throughout the webinar and answer those as we go. So certainly if there is anything that you're unsure about, let me know. Likewise, if you would like to speak about anything after this, such as implementing a performance appraisal or maybe dealing with a performance issue in your organization, I will leave our contact details. So you can contact us directly, and we would be delighted to help. So if we look now at the difference between the performance management side of things and a performance appraisal. So these are some of the key differences. So performance management, as I said, it's an ongoing process. It's every single day. When you have staff, performance management should never ever stop. It's relentless, it's ongoing, and it should be daily. Performance appraisals are only once per year. Some organizations do them twice per year or every quarter, depending on the size of your organization, but normally they're at a very set time, and they're an overall view of performance throughout that period of time. Performance management then, so we'll focus on present performance, whereas performance appraisals will focus on past performance. Performance management is very much daily communication and feedback related to performance and behavior. whereas a performance appraisal is structured feedback based on ratings. Performance management focuses on short-term tasks and goals, whereas performance appraisals focus on long-term goals. So if you think of it in a way that if there is an issue such as you have an employee who is late regularly, or there has been an issue in their work that they have produced, such as inaccuracies or grammatical errors or whatever it may be, that should very much be focused on there and then under performance management. Issues like that should not be ignored and certainly should not be left until a performance appraisal, because they will only escalate, they will impact on your productivity, and it would be unreasonable to leave a period of time before you actually raise those issues. So that's why we say it focuses on short-term tasks and goals, whereas your performance appraisals will look at long-term goals. And this will start to make more sense to you as we progress on in the webinar. Performance management can potentially focus on shortfalls in performance, and this is what feedback is about. Staff should receive regular feedback, particularly if there are any concerns whatsoever with their performance, if there are any shortfalls or if there are any discrepancies in their work. Those should be dealt with there and then again, and that could be having that difficult conversation, but it's short-term pain for long-term gain. Whereas appraisals should not be used to discuss specific shortfalls. So again, appraisals should not be used as a way of lumping together all that constructive or negative feedback and putting it all into the appraisal. That will then become a very demotivating exercise for both parties. Performance management can sometimes result in disciplinary action if there is persistent underperformance, whereas performance appraisals should never result in disciplinary action. Performance management should feed into the overall performance appraisal process. So your performance management is all the time throughout the year, and that will then feed into that helicopter view when it comes to the performance appraisal. And the performance appraisal will be meaningless unless there is a robust performance management system in place. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying here is unless you have all of these things on the left here, you won't be able to conduct a meaningful performance appraisal. And we're going to talk you through now exactly just some simple tools to help get you there. Performance appraisals without performance management will lead to a very demotivating process and a demotivated employee. It will be a very difficult process as well for employers or managers to complete. It will end up being a box ticking exercise that drains the manager's time. You will end up having a very surprised employee as well if they have not been made aware of any issues throughout the year, and overall a negative event. So performance management is an ongoing, should be ongoing, and it is very much the foundation for an effective performance appraisal process. Appraisals would be a waste of time without performance management. So before you performance manage your staff, what I would say is a very good exercise actually to do is categorize your staff in terms of their own performance, where their shortfalls are, if they have any training needs, if there are any conduct issues, and where basically the gaps lie. And that will give you a good idea as to how your team looks from a performance point of view. Determine if your staff are able to carry out their job role, and if so, are they willing to carry out their job role? So what we use here is something called skill or will. And if you can do this on like a 4-box table and categorize your staff into 4 categories. So the first will be, do you have anybody who is willing and able? So this is This is a fantastic staff member who is very much capable of doing the job, and they're willing to be there as well. These are the types of staff members that you want to retain, to keep in your business, and you want to make sure that they're motivated and engaged in their work. Performance appraisals are very important to these staff as well, because it means that you can give them good ratings. It can help retain them, and that feedback will be very important to them as well. The second category out of the four then is willing and unable. So this is someone who has a great attitude, but for some reason they are unable at this point in time to carry out the job role. This could very likely be someone within their probationary period, someone new to the organisation. So again, they have a great attitude, they're very engaged, they're very motivated, but they still need that training to be able to do the job. It's very normal to have someone like that within their probationary period. And so it's up to the employer then to ensure that a really good induction is in place, that the appropriate training has been put in place, so that at the end of that 6 months or whatever the probationary period is, that they move up to the willing and able box. You then have someone who is a little bit more challenging because they're unwilling, but they're able. So they're very capable of doing their job, but for some reason they are not willing. So there is an issue there with attitude, and for some reason, it might be something very simple. Maybe they were overlooked for promotion. Maybe they have been bogged down with work over a long period of time. We don't know exactly what the root cause of that is, but as an employer, it's very important to find out through communication with that employee to see if it can be resolved. It's normally, if someone is able to do the job but they're unwilling, it's normally someone who's been there for a period of time and they have fallen from box 1 to box 3 for some reason. So again, that is down to communication, regular one-to-ones with this employee to see if you can get to the root cause of that and address it. And the last type of staff member that you hopefully don't have, because this can be extremely challenging to deal with, is someone who is unwilling and unable. So they neither want to be there, nor are they capable of actually doing the job. With someone like that, it's normally best to proceed with some sort of formal procedure, unless you feel that communication can resolve the issues that lie with that employee. But I mean, you really shouldn't have anybody in box 4 there. And if you do, it would be really good for your own business to act on that as soon as possible, because that can become quite toxic within the business. It can spread to other employees as well, and it can escalate into much bigger issues. So I suppose if there is action with all 4 categories of staff, but that is an excellent exercise to do yourself as a manager, business owner, employer, to see exactly what action you have to take within your business. So if you have someone willing and able, that's brilliant, but it doesn't mean to say that you just leave them be. They will continue to need motivated, engaged, and to stay in that box, so that they don't become stagnant in their job role or demotivated for whatever reason. So you do need to continue to communicate with those people and ensure that they remain willing and able, and ensure they don't fall into box 3. Someone who is willing and unable will likely require training. It will likely be someone within their probationary period. And again, regular communication, regular support. We would always recommend that every organisation has some sort of daily briefing with their employees, so that there is support, communication, and also maximises productivity as well. Unwell and enable, again, that will come down to communication to find out the root cause of why the person has become unwilling. And unwilling and unable is probably a category of staff there that you may need support with that if you have to go down a formal procedure. And if that's the case, feel free to contact us and we can support you with that. In any case, you really shouldn't have anybody in boxes 2, 3, or 4 if they are outside their probationary period. If you do, you do need to look at that. So Saoirse is going to send on the slides or a recording of this on to everyone, and this is just something that you can do in your own time, is list out the performance management techniques that you currently use and determine, are they effective in your business? So performance management techniques normally comprise of daily activity, and this is so important in every single business. Every single organization, there should be some sort of performance management techniques in place on a day-to-day basis, particularly in these times where a huge amount of staff are remote working or hybrid working. They will actually likely need more support so that they don't become isolated or again stagnant or overworked or underworked in their jobs. And it does give an element of I suppose not control, but it helps to enhance productivity, certainly, and an element of support then to the employee. Examples of performance management techniques would be daily briefings. So in our business, for example, we have a weekly team briefing on a Monday morning, and we have daily briefings with each individual then every single morning, and that potentially could last 5-10 minutes max to see what's on everyone's agenda if they have any questions regarding their workload. Other performance management techniques might be feedback. So ensuring that staff receive regular feedback, monthly one-to-ones then perhaps to do a helicopter view of where you're up to on everything, measuring through the use of targets, and being very clear on expectations as well, such as job descriptions. So just looking at everything that you have in place. Is it effective? Is it clear? And could you do better on any of those things? I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar there that we use what's called the B.E.T system. And this is something that we have come up with here at HR Team based on the combined years of experience of all our team. And it's proven to work. It's very simple, but it is very effective. So the B is for basic standards. These are really non-negotiable items normally contained within your terms and conditions of employment, or otherwise known as your contract of employment. Examples of basic standards could be timekeeping, mobile phone usage in the workplace, dress code, smoke breaks, things like that. It's basically non-negotiable things that you wouldn't think to put into a job advertisement, for example, to say, okay, I want someone who, logs on at the correct time, who conducts themselves professionally at client meetings, who generally behaves in a way that is professional, who doesn't take excessive breaks. Right? You don't put any of that stuff ever in a job ad because you actually take it for granted that the person will behave in a certain way. However, it is important to make a note of those basic standards for your business and to insert them into your terms and conditions or into your employee handbook. What we would recommend is a code of conduct where all of these things can go into, that goes into your employee handbook, and that forms then part of your contract of employment. Those things then should be covered at induction at the start of someone's employment, so that there is absolute clarity in terms of what your basic standards are. As I said, basic standards are normally non-negotiable things. And so if you have them written down and an issue arises, that you're able to address that very quickly. The E stands for expectations, and that those can be contained within what's called a job description. So job descriptions, historically in many organizations, were things that were printed out, that were gathering dust in a filing cabinet. That is no longer the case. Job descriptions are extremely important documents. They can be subject to change within reason, depending on how a business might evolve, but they are very useful and helpful when it comes to clarifying expectations of a job role. So if you have an employee who is carrying out the role of marketing executive, for example, how is that person to know what your expectations are from them if it's not written down? And again, this should be covered very clearly at induction. As a marketing executive, you are required to devise a strategy for the organization's marketing that is to be reviewed quarterly. You should submit reports to the board of directors on a monthly basis. You should manage the social media platforms for the business, whatever it may be. You should conduct business development strategies on a regular basis. Whatever it is that you expect from that role, ensure that it is written down in a very clear job description, that is covered in induction, and the person is absolutely clear on what is expected from them. Unless you do that, it's going to be very difficult to do any appraisal down the line, because the duties will not be clear. Managers should conduct daily team briefings to discuss daily tasks. So this is something I mentioned before. This is something we do in our own business on a very regular basis as well. Is conducting daily briefings. They might not be team briefings. They could be one-to-one briefings, depending on what it is, to keep that communication going. But your overall purpose of a job description is to clarify those expectations and make sure that they're absolutely clear to the employee. And then the T is your targets, or otherwise known as KPIs, or key performance indicators. And again, those are subject to change. They're not contractual within reason, but managers can review these regularly with their teams to keep track of process. So if you have your B and your E and your T, and you provide regular feedback to employees, you communicate with your employees on a very regular basis, you address any shortfalls in performance, then you will have a much stronger foundation to carry out your performance appraisal once per year, or however often you do those. Without these things, it's very difficult to do any appraisal, because there will be very much a lack of clarity for your employees in terms of what they will actually be measured on. If you do require any support with any of these things, let us know, and we can work with you on that. So in terms of the expectations or job descriptions, this is very much an exercise for the business owner or the manager or the employer to do, because you will be the person with an operational understanding of your business and what is expected from that job role within your business. So they do need to be clearly outlined to your team. They do provide a basis for measuring performance. So for example, if you did have to have a difficult conversation, let's take, for example, someone within their probationary period, and you had to discuss issues throughout that time, your job description will be a very good backup document, a very good evidence-based document to have that conversation. And let's not forget, when we have employees, we are also bound by employment law. So if employees raise a claim with the Workplace Relations Commission, it's these types of evidence that are looked for by the Workplace Relations Commission to defend a claim from an employer point of view. So whilst they're all extremely important from a productivity point of view and a performance management point of view, they're also important from a legal point of view as well. So in terms of the job description, just to finish up on this section, they should include your or the manager's expectations, the tasks and functions, the responsibilities and priorities. And you need to question, does everyone know exactly what is expected from them? Is there any overlap of job roles or duplication, or are there things missing? So we will send on these slides to you as well. I don't want to focus too much on job descriptions, but I will touch briefly on targets. So until you have your basic standards and expectations in place, you won't be able to do any targets. This really comes last. But it is the exciting bit for the business owner as well, because you're looking at what exactly do I want this job role to achieve when it comes to maybe revenue or deadlines or bringing in new clientele or whatever it may be. So your performance targets are subject to change they might change every year depending on how the business evolves. But it's very important that they're written down, that they're understood, that they're agreed with the employee as well. The importance of a target means that you can be very, very specific in your performance management. And if you do have to have that difficult conversation where you feel that someone is underperforming, you can revert to your targets and say, okay, I see you didn't meet the deadline of the 31st of March in terms of what you had to do here. Is there any reason for that? Or it may be a financial or a revenue target where someone would have revenue targets on a monthly basis. So maybe it's 20,000 per month. Again, you can really use those targets to measure that performance, to motivate employees as well. I mean, a huge amount of employees are motivated by targets. They will get excited by that. They will be very clear again on what is expected from them as well. And you can do other things with targets as well. I mean, you can look at commission, bonuses, incentives, depending on what your workforce is actually motivated by. But it is a great way of motivating staff. It's also a very helpful tool in terms of performance managing your staff. So examples of KPIs would be revenue, it could be employee productivity time, it could be gross profit margin. Costs is another one where employees might be required to stay at a certain cost level. Wage costs, wastage, customer complaints could be another one. So you will have job roles that potentially are more subjective than objective. And you could maybe apply something like deadlines to a role like that as well. So it's definitely possible to apply KPIs, even if they're not a financial or a cost or a revenue type of job role. So the appraisal process, the reason I wanted, and we always do this when we're asked to look at performance appraisals, we will always start with the importance of a good performance management foundation. So what I would say within your business, if you don't have an appraisal process in place and you're thinking of implementing one, start with the performance management process and make sure you have those things in place first before you even look at an appraisal, because it will become a very meaningless task and no one will want to do it without that performance management foundation. And always come back to your B.E.T. If you have your B.E.T system in place, you will be well on your way to a good, meaningful appraisal process. So what do you actually do at an appraisal? You discuss actual performance against targets. You discuss positive feedback. You also may give constructive criticism where necessary. However, if you are going to do that, for example, if you have someone who has not been performing, it would never be left as something new at the appraisal. It should always have been discussed using your performance management techniques in advance of the appraisal. And you may agree on an action plan forward. When it comes to rater bias, we would definitely recommend that you avoid this. So the halo effect, where everything about this employee is fantastic and great and brilliant. Again, the horns effect, where everything is negative. Central tendency is sitting on the fence, where you're not given a straight answer at all because the employee will not be clear on anything. Lenience, being extremely lenient or being extremely strict. And same as me, that's basically if you have an employee who's very much like you, you refer them, oh, that's like me. Okay, so avoid that rater bias and always come back to a performance appraisal form. And it's very important that you do have that form or that paperwork right before you actually start, because that will allow you to give evidence-based feedback throughout the appraisal. In terms of a checklist for performance appraisals, it's really good to look at this before you even start. So comes back to the B.E.T system. Base the process on well-written job descriptions or job-related activities and targets. Ensure that the employee keeps a copy as well of the performance development plan and expectations. Provide ongoing monitoring and feedback on performance to the employee. So basically, if you're saying yes to all of this, you will be ready for your appraisal. Yeah, train your managers on all aspects of the process and how to reduce bias and error in assessments. This is really, really important. If you are a larger organization and you have more than one manager who is doing appraisals, it's so important that that process is approached in a consistent manner. And so training managers on the process, on performance management and on the performance appraisal form and how to approach that is mandatory in my view. I would say even if it's 1 to 2 hours training on that performance appraisal process, I think it's really worthwhile to get the most out of the process. Ensure that the performance appraisal form accurately documents performance. If overall performance is poor, you can definitely say that, and that is different from maybe bringing to someone's attention that they've done something wrong or there's a shortfall in performance. It could be a holistic overview of everything that has happened in that particular year, and that is fine. Now, if you do have someone who has overall poor performance, then the performance appraisal, it shouldn't really be left at that. They probably will need to go on some sort of performance improvement plan or a letter of concern or something like that. Again, if you do have someone who is a persistent underperformer, let us know and we can talk you through how to actually deal with that. So in terms of the appraisal process, what should you do? Just a few do's and don'ts. Do review the job description and the previous year's appraisal report to check the job duties and responsibilities and what was said at the previous year's appraisal. You may not all be ready for that at this point because it might be the first time you've ever done an appraisal, but if you have done appraisals last year, definitely have that information to hand so you can refer back to that. Do talk to other line managers or supervisors and peers where appropriate with whom the employee has been working during the year to obtain factual feedback on performance. Do think through what aspects of the employee's performance are to be discussed and identify specific examples of both good and not so good performance. Do be prepared to back up any criticism with facts and examples. Do consider what points the employee may wish to raise and think through how any delicate areas can be best handled. And it's really important at the appraisal to listen to the employee as well, and we'll go through how to actually do that in a second. And you think this goes without saying, but do agree the date, time and place for the interview at least 2 weeks in advance, taking into account the employee's preferences. Part-time employees should be appraised at times during their working hours. This may just be something in your calendar because you have a very busy calendar, but this could be a really, really important event for the employee. So it's really important that you emphasize the importance of it to you as well. Agree the date and time and place in advance, and don't chop and change. Be on time, give it the time that it deserves, because this could be a really huge thing for the employee. It could be something that they're really looking forward to as well. So it's important to plan that time and to protect that time as well. So I just have a question in here. Will it make it biasness by referring to last year's appraisal? No, you can absolutely refer to last year's appraisal. For example, if another manager maybe has done that appraisal, then it's important not to focus on any evidence or information that you do not know is factual. So you might simply refer to it, but that information should not be used for this year's appraisal. Only the time frame in which the appraisal period has been covered should be used. So it doesn't do any harm whatsoever to refer to last year's appraisal. So things not to do at your appraisal with employees. So don't underestimate the time necessary for the interview. So make sure that you plan and protect as much time as possible for the appraisal, so that again you give it the time it deserves, and that the employee also feels valued in terms of the time that you're giving to them as well. Don't forget to brief each employee well in advance about the purpose and scope of the appraisal and interview, so that you can make the most out of that time, and that it becomes valuable time again for yourself and for the employee as well. And we'll go through how to do that in a second. Don't allow interruptions during the interview. Again, that's very, very important, so that the employee feels valued, that you're really emphasizing the importance of this exercise to the employee. So things like mobile phones, any other electronic devices or whatever it may be, avoid any interruptions whatsoever. Don't overlook the importance of taking into account the personality and temperament of each employee as well. And again, I suppose that could be a different training session altogether when it comes to personality types. But yes, indeed, you do have employees who do have different personality styles. You might have an employee who's extremely sensitive when it comes to feedback, and so it's important to take that into account in the delivery of how you express your feedback. That goes for day-to-day feedback as well as at appraisals. You might have employees who appreciate short and snappy and very clear feedback, and again, it's important to take that into account as well. The personality types. I mean, you can do personality tests on your employees as well, which is something that is becoming increasingly common for many employers, so that they're getting the most out of their employees. In terms of a form, it's really important to have some sort of standardized document that you use across the board. I would highly recommend not going into any appraisal unless you have some sort of standardized document that you follow. For a number of reasons, the meeting could become a talking shop where there's absolutely no structure, there's no beginning, middle and end, so it's a waste of time for everybody. The process is not documented, so the employee can't actually read what was being said afterwards. It becomes very unproductive as well. There's no time frame, and the employee is completely unaware of what is being measured during the performance appraisal, and for your own benefit, it gives you a huge amount of structure. Your performance appraisal form should be, I mean, there are no hard and fast rules as to how that is designed, obviously, as long as it avoids any discriminatory language or questions, and it is usually related to the job role. So, for example, you might have a different performance appraisal form for a manager to another staff member, because managers have to have certain skills and competencies when it comes to maybe managing people or managing budgets or managing operations or whatever it may be. And you know, for example, a HR consultant may need other competencies in other areas. A receptionist might need an extremely good telephone manners. So your performance appraisal forms, they don't have to differ per job role, but they will probably add more value if you do invest that time at the start, making sure that your information is related to the expectations of the job role and the targets as well, which comes back to the beauty of having your B.E.T system in place. This is just an example of a form, and this is something that we would recommend that you have some sort of a rating. Now, we rated A, B, C, D, 4 rates, so that you are avoiding that central tendency bias. You can't sit on the fence with an A, B, C, D. You know, so for example, if you had 5 ratings there and you went for C, you're completely sitting in the middle. So you have to really explain the reason for your rating. You know, these are examples of things that might be important to a certain job role. Section 2, target and performance oriented work approach, pays attention to company standards and keeps work area tidy. Timekeeping, absence levels, again, just some very brief examples in terms of what is important to your specific business. In terms of then preparing the appraisal, this is really important as well. It's not recommended that you just rock up on the day and have a chat with the employee, because again, it becomes a meaningless task, very much a tick box exercise. So we would recommend, in order to effectively prepare for any appraisal, that you have your form, and that you send that form to the employee who is being appraised 7 days in advance of the appraisal, that you ask them to complete that, send it back to you, and you also complete the form, and you bring them together at the appraisal. So this means that you will have a very meaningful conversation about how the employee feels that they are performing themselves. So for example, if an employee rates themselves an A in something, then that's obviously excellent. But you maybe rate them as a B. That will fuel the conversation. And I see you have rated yourself an A there in your speed at getting back to clients. I would actually rate you a B in that, but can you take me through why you would rate yourself an A? Again, if you have someone who rates themselves a D in something and you rate them a B, you can ask them to talk you through, why would you rate yourself a D in this? And you would talk it through. So it gives a really good structure. From my experience of conducting the appraisal, it's a really effective way of giving feedback, but also gauging where the employee is in terms of their own perspective of their own performance as well, and what support, for example, that they need. So it is recommended to have the necessary facts about the employee's performance in front of you at the time of the appraisal interview. Doing so will provide specific factual examples of job performance for you to discuss with the employee during the appraisal interview. And without such evidence, the appraisal may turn out into a very haphazard chat based on generalizations, which is what you do not want. Having specific examples will be particularly important if you need to discuss aspects of an employee's performance that is not wholly satisfactory. So again, If you do have some niggles as an employer that you're not happy with, so for example, if there are inaccuracies in someone's work, that should have been addressed with the employee absolutely before the appraisal, but it's still fine to raise that in the appraisal. So you might say, okay, on the 1st of September, we had a conversation regarding your responses to the clients and the need for you to focus on accuracy and grammar, for example, or whatever it may be. At that time, you received a performance improvement plan. And so for that reason, you might rate them a C or a D until they are back on track. So this will very much act as a starting point for discussion on why performance was not satisfactory in the particular area and what can be done to achieve as improvement in the future. Without concrete examples, it's very difficult for you to actually back up what you're saying. So this comes back to your job descriptions and your targets and any previous conversations that you may have had regarding underperformance. The employee may not accept your feedback that their performance was unsatisfactory, and sometimes an employee can become very defensive, so you really don't want that process becoming difficult or hostile in any way. It's important to keep it as constructive as possible throughout. Okay, so someone has asked there, what is the difference between the B.E.T system and the 360-degree appraisal, please? So briefly, in a nutshell, the B.E.T system is a method of performance management. So that is your basic standards, your expectations, and your targets. And without those, you will not be able to do a performance appraisal. So that's performance management. 360 is a method. It's one of the many methods of delivering an appraisal system. So a 360-degree appraisal, first of all, you should have a really robust policy in place for that, if that is a method of appraisal that you're using. And it normally will require the appraisal to ask all stakeholders that the employee works with to complete feedback for that particular employee in advance of the appraisal. So it might be manager, work colleagues, supervisor, it could even be clients, it could be other stakeholders depending on who the person works with. It's one method of appraisal. It can be a very good method of appraisals, but it definitely has to be done correctly, and there has to be a policy for it as well. So the first step is for the appraisal form to be given to the employee 2 weeks in advance. I said 7 days. It can be anything you want as long as it gives you enough time in advance of the appraisal meeting. The employee should be asked to complete this and return it to their line manager or the appraiser. The form should be returned to the line manager 7 days prior to the appraisal meeting, and this will ensure that you as the line manager have adequate time to review what the employee has said and to prepare for the meeting. So, and it's really important that you take that time before the meeting as well, particularly if you are on a completely different page to your employee. You will be able to prepare for that. You will be able to give constructive feedback in relation to that, and you will just know what's coming in relation to that as well, so that you can have your feedback ready. The document should be hand delivered and not sent by a letter, and the reason for this is so that this is clearly explained to the employee, the purpose of the appraisal and the deadline for the completed form. So again, this is just an example of a form. You can use whatever form you want as long as it is clear, as long as that there is some sort of rating system, as long as you're able to give constructive feedback based on evidence. So see, somebody has just asked there, what does the B.E.T stand for? So it's basic standards, expectations and targets. So at the appraisal meeting, both parties will have a discussion regarding the ratings and the employee's performance. This will normally consist of questions such as, I see you've rated yourself as an A for consistently meeting targets at work. Can you talk me through why you believe you are an A? And this will then fuel a conversation. At the end of the appraisal, the manager and employee will agree an action plan for the following year. It would be good to practice for the line manager. It would be good practice for the line manager to sit down with the employee at regular points after the appraisal to discuss the employee's performance against the action plan. And that's where your performance management comes in, particularly if there are any shortfalls. The employee will then have their own opportunity to discuss the rationale for the rating. So it's very important that the employee is given a forum to talk and that the employer listens to what the employee is saying. Once the employee has finished speaking, the manager will then outline the rating they have applied and their rationale. So for example, the manager could agree with the employee, or the manager may wish to score differently. The manager should provide a clear rationale with examples for their score. At the end of the appraisal, the manager and employee will agree an action plan for the following year. So once the appraisal has been done, there might still be a little bit of work to do afterwards. Finalising the form is the first thing to do and making sure that the employee gets a copy. It's also, as I said, good practice for the line manager to sit down with the employee regularly afterwards, particularly if there have been any issues. And also if the employee has had any questions at the appraisal, that they have had those questions answered, that there is nothing left there unanswered. So again, this could be a very important event for the employee. They could be building themselves up to ask questions and stuff like that. So, it's really important that they get an answer, a very clear answer from the appraiser as well. So for example, employees may ask for a salary review or progression opportunities at their appraisal, and it's very important that they do get an answer to that question. You may wish to follow up the appraisal with what's called a personal development plan. And again, that might be to focus on areas where there are training needs. The appraisal is an excellent time as well to do a training needs analysis to find out if the employee has any specific training needs, if there is any training available in the organisation, if they wish to progress into a more senior role, for example, and likewise to update their training record. So if they have completed any training throughout the year, that should be recorded. So just another question that has come in. There's a trend of moving away from biannual and annual appraisals into more routine conversations. What do you think? Yeah, this is 100% agree with that. And that is very much focused on the performance management structure that we discussed at the beginning of the webinar. Routine conversations are absolutely key. Feedback is absolutely key, and it's a really good performance management technique as well. One thing I would say that is really important about performance management / your routine conversations is relentlessness. So if you're a manager, a business owner, or an employer, management of people never goes away. It never goes away. You have to be relentless. What I would say is it's still useful to do your annual appraisal. It does absolutely no harm at all. Some organizations don't do them, and that's fine. There's absolutely no legal requirement to do them. But I would still recommend you do your annual appraisal because it's a helicopter view of the overall performance. Employees tend to like that overall feedback as well, but you don't have to. What I would say is if you don't do appraisals, make sure that you have really robust performance management systems in place, and that's where your B.E.T system comes in. So just to finish up and to brief you on some of these things, communication tool is your daily team briefing. And again, this is a very good communication tool. It allows your team members to plan. It gives you a chance to do an action plan of how you want the day to go. Now, this is very short term, it's not long term like your performance appraisal. What are the major objectives you want to accomplish, and start with the biggest goals or the toughest assignments first, and prioritize urgent versus important tasks. So this is very much short term. Appraisal is long term. It's long term goals. It gives an employee an opportunity to talk about their overall performance, their overall training needs. Maybe they want to progress within the organisation into a more senior role, and that gives a really good opportunity to look at that as well. Like the last question that came in there, feedback should be given to employees regularly. They should be very routine. They should be very frequent as well. And the process of addressing performance issues is scrutinised at a tribunal, as I said before. So all of this is mandatory in terms of day-to-day performance management and productivity, but it's very important as well if you do come against a legal employment law issue. And just to brief you on the B.E.T system, your basic standards, expectations and targets is what I would say you should start with. If you don't have any of those things in place, it would be worth looking at them. So your basic standards would be in your terms and conditions of employment or your employee handbook. Your expectations is your job description. Your targets are your KPIs or your key performance indicators. So your next steps, review your performance management process. In particular, make sure that you have expectations and targets in place. Make sure you communicate daily with your staff. That is so important. Give feedback where necessary. Ensure poor performance is not ignored, and agree on when performance appraisals will take place. Make employees aware of when appraisals will take place. And just two other things there, make sure you have a form for your performance appraisal and ensure your line managers are trained. So that hopefully gives you an overview of performance appraisals. If there is anything that you're not sure about, if you really want to look into that whole making sure you have a contract and handbook in place, or job descriptions or targets, get in contact with us. Likewise, if you do have someone on your team who you're not entirely happy with performance wise, or if you're dealing with probationary issue or any employment law issue in general, you can contact us on this number at the bottom here. So it's 00353 1695 0749. You can email us directly as well. My email address is Breda, BREDA, at hrteamservices.com, or you can visit our website to find a full range of services there. So we do cater for all sectors throughout Ireland, and the majority of our clients avail of our HR support package, which means that they do have our team of expert employment law consultants on tap during business hours. So if you are dealing with an issue and you're not quite sure as to what to do legally, then we will take you through that step by step and do all your letters in the background. Make sure your contracts of employment and your employee handbook are completely up to date as well. We also provide full support in that whole performance management piece. We provide training to your managers as well. We provide ongoing health and safety support also, and we're also launching 2 new pieces of software at the end of this month. One is a leave management piece of software, and the other is a library of HR documents. So we do provide that kind of holistic service, so no problem if you need to contact us. Our next webinars are Thursday the 25th of November. You can register directly on our website, and we will have a full range of webinars then for 2022 on there very soon.